What if the twilight of life is not a gentle descent, but a slow erosion of meaning, a silent theft no one notices until the emptiness is too vast to fill? What if the question haunting so many aging hearts is not how much time is left, but why any of it still matters? Perhaps the tragedy is not that the body weakens, but that the soul forgets what it was once burning for. And yet, beneath the surface of every forgotten dream lies a pulse, faint, persistent, whispering that there was once a reason to endure, a reason that did not depend on youth, status, or applause. Why then do so many abandon the search when the horizon draws near? They told us that meaning was a reward for action, that purpose was found in careers, relationships, and achievements. But what if that was the first lie we believed? What if the deepest form of meaning is not achieved but revealed, often when everything else is stripped away, when the applause fades and the mirrors no longer reflect who we once were? A terrifying question emerges. If I am no longer what I do, who am I? And in that silent confrontation, many turn away, mistaking the void for the end, when it is, perhaps, only the threshold. There is a secret buried in this paradox, one that Viktor Frankl hinted at, that life never ceases to ask questions of us, even in its final chapters, perhaps especially then. Yet, the answers are not offered to the passive. They must be wrestled from the darkness, torn from the illusions that once comforted us. What if the purpose of old age is not to rest, but to reveal? What if the final act is not about fading quietly, but about discovering the meaning that was hidden all along? Stay, because somewhere in this unraveling lies a truth that could transform not only how we age, but how we live. There is a silence that arrives with age, not the peaceful quiet of a life well lived, but the unsettling hush that comes when the world stops asking for you. At first it is subtle. The phone rings less, the calendar empties, the mirror reflects a stranger with familiar eyes. Then a deeper realization creeps in. The roles that once defined you, parent, worker, dreamer, builder, begin to dissolve like mist. And with their departure comes a question most are too afraid to ask aloud. If I am no longer needed, do I still matter? This is not mere melancholy. It is the soul's rebellion against invisibility, a primal scream buried beneath polite smiles and morning routines. It is the weight of existence stripped of its scaffolding, revealing the raw, unfiltered question that haunts every human being when the noise fades. What is the purpose of me now? But perhaps the cruelty lies not in the absence of meaning, but in the illusion that meaning must always look the same. We were conditioned to believe that purpose is forged in productivity, measured in results, validated by recognition. Yet the moment those measures vanish, we confuse their disappearance with the death of significance itself. How many silently crumble beneath that misunderstanding? How many confuse retirement with irrelevance, solitude with emptiness, stillness with the end? There is a deception here, a subtle one, whispering that the season of meaning has passed, when in truth, it may only now be beginning. And yet the tragedy is this: most never stay long enough in the discomfort to discover what waits on the other side. It is in this threshold and this space between who we were and who we are becoming that the real battle begins. It is not a war fought with the hands, but with the heart, because the body ages, yes, but the hunger for meaning does not. That hunger, once fed by ambitions and achievements, now demands something deeper, something purer, a reason not to be seen, but simply to be. And herein lies the paradox. The more we resist the erosion of old identities, the further we drift from the new purpose that is trying to emerge. Could it be that the pain of aging is not about losing meaning at all, but about refusing to meet it where it now lives? The human soul, Viktor Frankl believed, is never truly empty. It is merely misdirected. Even in suffering, especially in suffering, life is still asking questions of us. But in old age, those questions change their language. They speak not of what we can build or achieve, but of what we can give, reveal, and accept. They no longer concern what the world expects from us, but what existence still expects from us now. This is not the end of the dialogue. It is simply a different chapter, one written in quieter tones, but carrying deeper truths. And so the silence that once felt like abandonment begins to reveal itself as an invitation, not to retreat, but to listen for the small, persistent voice beneath the noise of fading titles and forgotten tasks, to listen to the pulse that says, there is still something for you to do, something only you can offer. But what is it? And why does it hide itself behind the veil of loneliness and loss? That is the riddle of this stage of life, and it is one that few dare to solve. There is a peculiar cruelty in how society treats the old. It parades youth as the currency of value and treats age as a debt to be repaid in silence. And so many internalize the message that their chapter is over, their relevance expired, their story concluded. Yet this is the greatest deception of all, because the end of one story is always the beginning of another. The tragedy is not that people lose their meaning, but that they stop searching for it once it no longer wears the familiar mask. They mistake the absence of recognition for the absence of purpose. But meaning is not applause. It is not usefulness measured by others. It is a conversation between you and life itself, and life is still speaking. But can we hear it when our ears are tuned only to the language of utility? The human spirit, conditioned for decades to seek validation in what it does, struggles to find worth in what it is. And so begins the slow erosion, not of capacity, but of identity. I am nothing now, whispers the voice inside, because I no longer produce. Yet that voice is lying, because the essence of a human being is never in what they achieve. It is in what they mean. And meaning does not retire. It does not weaken. It does not wither. It simply waits for us to ask better questions. What if the purpose of aging is not to continue doing, but to begin understanding? What if the reason we slow down is not because life is withdrawing from us, but because it is finally ready to reveal itself? There is a wisdom that only time can unlock, but it hides itself from those who refuse to look beyond nostalgia and regret. Too many stare at the past as if it were a prison gate, longing for what was, instead of leaning toward what could still be. They forget that meaning is not stored behind them, it is summoned ahead of them. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. To rediscover purpose in later life requires a kind of courage most never develop. It is not the courage to climb mountains or conquer empires, but the courage to face oneself without disguise, to ask, who am I when there is nothing left to prove? To accept, I am still becoming, even now. It is a terrifying honesty, and yet, within that honesty lies liberation. Because once we stop clinging to the identities that once defined us, we make room for the deeper truth that was always waiting underneath. This stage of life is not a void, it is a frontier. But like all frontiers, it demands that we cross a threshold, from performance to presence, from ambition to essence. And this crossing does not happen by chance. It happens when we stop running from the silence and instead step into it, not as victims of time, but as seekers of truth. The question is not what is left for me to do. The question is what is left for me to become. There is a moment, and it comes for everyone, when the scaffolding of life collapses. The children are grown. The work is done. The crowds no longer chant your name. And in the stillness, an unsettling thought begins to surface. Was it all just preparation for this emptiness? But this is no emptiness. It is space. And space is not absence, but invitation. The human being is the only creature that asks why, and it does so until its final breath. That question is not a curse. It is the signature of our humanity. And yet, many grow afraid of it in old age. They try to silence it with distractions, numb it with routine, bury it beneath nostalgia. But the question does not go away. It lingers, because it is not seeking an answer. It is seeking your attention. The most profound purposes often emerge from the places we least want to look. In suffering, in loss, in endings. Frankl taught that meaning is not discovered in spite of pain, but through it. And aging, for all its quiet devastations, is a sacred invitation to look into the heart of what it means to exist. What remains when all else is taken away? What is left when the applause dies? These are not cruel questions. They are clarifying ones. They strip away illusions and leave only the essence, a soul still capable of love, of giving, of transcending itself. Yet many resist this journey because it feels like defeat. To embrace vulnerability feels like surrender. To admit loneliness feels like weakness. But what if these so-called weaknesses are not enemies, but doorways? What if the ache in the chest is not a symptom of meaning lost, but a signal that meaning is calling from a deeper place? Our pain is not proof that life has no purpose. It is evidence that we are still searching for it. To walk this path is to confront the paradox of existence, that we are never closer to transcendence than when everything we once clung to is gone. The elderly who find meaning do not do so because they have more time, but because they have less illusion. They no longer chase the external, they cultivate the internal. They no longer ask, "What can I get from life?" They ask, "What is life still asking of me?" And that shift changes everything. The danger is not in growing old. The danger is in growing numb. Because the moment we stop seeking meaning, we stop living, even if we are still breathing. And so the spiral turns, from identity to essence, from doing to being, from seeking recognition to embodying truth. It is a journey few undertake willingly, but those who do discover something extraordinary. That meaning was never something to be found at all. It was something to be revealed, piece by piece, in the silence of becoming. There is a peculiar irony to the final chapters of life. The more the external world fades, the more the internal world expands, if we let it. But most do not. They shrink with their circumstances. They collapse into the space life leaves behind instead of inhabiting it fully. And so they wither, not because life has nothing left to give, but because they have stopped offering themselves to it. The tragedy is not death itself. It is dying before death arrives. But what if the true purpose of these later years is not to fade, but to ignite in a different way? Imagine for a moment that your suffering, the loneliness, the irrelevance, the quiet ache of being forgotten, is not meaningless, but sacred. Imagine it as the soil in which a new kind of significance can grow. This is the essence of Frankl's vision, that life never stops demanding something from us. Even at the edge of existence, there is a task waiting to be embraced, perhaps not grand, perhaps invisible to others, but profoundly necessary. It might be forgiveness. It might be wisdom shared. It might be love offered without condition. The scale does not matter. The meaning does. Yet to see this, we must unlearn everything we were taught about value. We must reject the notion that worth is measured by what we produce, or how many notice. Meaning is not performance. It is presence. It is not measured in outcomes. It is measured in depth. And this is where many fail. They search for purpose as if it were something lost, instead of realizing it has simply changed its shape. To embrace this new form of meaning requires humility. The humility to accept that your life's most important contribution may come when no one is watching. It demands courage, the courage to face yourself without distraction. And it calls for faith, the faith that even when the world forgets your name, existence still knows why you are here. This is not resignation. It is transcendence. It is the quiet revolution that turns despair into devotion. And when this understanding takes root, something miraculous happens. The fear of insignificance loses its power. The weight of invisibility dissolves. You stop asking, "Does my life still matter?" and start realizing, it always did, just not in the way I imagined. And that realization is not the end of meaning. It is its rebirth. In the end, the question is not whether life has meaning, but whether we are still willing to seek it, even here, even now. The elderly who lose their sense of purpose are not victims of time, but of forgetfulness. They have forgotten that meaning is not a chapter of life. It is the thread that weaves through every chapter, waiting to be rediscovered in new patterns. And perhaps this is the final lesson, that purpose was never in the roles we played or the accolades we received, but in the way we responded to existence itself. To respond now, in the winter of life, means to look beyond the shrinking horizons and into the vast interior landscape still unexplored. It means to stop mourning what is gone, and start cultivating what remains. It means to offer love even when it is not returned, to create beauty even when no one is watching, to nurture hope even when the world seems indifferent. These are not small acts. They are acts of defiance against the void. And in their defiance, they create meaning anew. There is in this stage a deeper kind of freedom, one that comes not from choice, but from surrender. Surrender not as defeat, but as alignment. When we stop fighting the inevitabilities of aging and begin collaborating with them, they become allies rather than enemies. The fragility of the body becomes a reminder of the strength of the spirit. The brevity of time becomes an invitation to presence. The proximity of death becomes the final teacher of what it means to truly live. And perhaps this is the paradox at the heart of it all. We spend our lives searching for purpose only to realize that purpose was never something to be found. It was something we were meant to become. Aging strips away the illusions that obscured this truth, leaving only what is real, a soul still capable of meaning, even as everything else falls away. The question is whether we will answer the call before the silence claims us. Because life will continue to whisper until the very last breath. There is still something you are meant to do. There is still a reason you are here. And perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest tragedy is not that so many elderly people lose their meaning, but that they never realized it was waiting for them in the darkness all along. There is a sacred stillness that lingers when all the noise subsides. A space where meaning is no longer something we chase, but something that breathes quietly within us. Perhaps the greatest illusion we ever believed was that purpose belonged to the strong, the young, the relentless. Yet here, at the threshold of life's twilight, we discover the deeper truth. That purpose was always waiting in the shadows, patient and unwavering, like a lantern that does not burn out even when no one is watching. The years do not steal our reason for being. They strip away the distractions that kept us from seeing it. And in that unveiling, we come face to face, not with an ending, but with the essence of why we were alive at all. Maybe meaning is not a destination but a mirror, one that reflects us most clearly when everything else has fallen away. And maybe the questions we feared most, what am I without my roles? Who am I without my usefulness? Were never meant to be answered with words, but with presence. The truth is that nothing essential is ever lost. What once gave us purpose in action can now give us purpose in being. The same hands that built empires can now hold another's trembling fingers. The same voice that once commanded rooms can now speak a single sentence that changes a life. Significance is not about size. It is about depth. And depth often reveals itself when the surface has gone silent. If you listen closely, you will hear that life is still speaking, not in the roar of achievements, but in the whisper of small sacred tasks that remain unfinished. There are hearts that still need your kindness, stories that still need your wisdom, wounds that still need your tenderness, and there is, above all, a self within you still waiting to be met, not the one defined by what you once did, but the one defined by who you are becoming now. This is the paradox and the promise. Even as everything ends, something greater is always beginning. Even as time slips through your fingers, eternity is taking shape within your grasp. So when the screen goes dark and silence returns, let it not be an ending but an invitation. Do not leave this truth here. Carry it into the corners of your days, into the quiet moments where doubt still lingers. Let it guide you toward deeper questions, toward braver choices, toward a life that continues to mean something beyond measure. And if this journey has stirred something in you, a memory, a longing, a spark, then stay with us. Share your story below, add your voice to this conversation, and become part of a circle that believes the search for meaning never truly ends. Subscribe, not out of habit, but out of purpose. Because the next chapter of this exploration is not mine alone, it is ours.